Naomi Brooks walked through the crystal doors of Le Montclair, carrying nothing but hope and desperation. The restaurant glittered with wealth, and everyone whispered about one woman who ruled with absolute terror. Vivian Lancaster, the millionaire's wife, had destroyed careers with a single word, and nobody dared challenge her. When Naomi politely asked if she could pour water at Vivian's table that first night, the entire restaurant held its breath waiting for the breakdown. But there was one thing Vivian didn't know about the quiet new waitress standing before her. Naomi had already survived loss that would break most people, and tonight Vivian was about to discover that some people refuse to bow no matter how much power you wield. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. Naomi Brooks stood outside Le Montclair, staring up at the golden script etched across smoked glass doors. The restaurant rose before her like a palace, 3 stories of old-world elegance wrapped in modern wealth. Chandeliers glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. Luxury cars lined the curved driveway. She smoothed down her crisp white shirt, took a breath that didn't quite steady her nerves, and stepped inside. The air smelled like expensive wine and fresh lilies. Marble floors stretched beneath her feet, polished to a mirror shine. Waiters glided between tables dressed in pristine uniforms, moving like dancers who'd rehearsed every step. Crystal glasses caught the light. Soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers. Everything whispered money, power, perfection. Naomi had worked in restaurants before, nice ones, even, but nothing like this. Le Montclair wasn't just a restaurant. It was where the city's elite came to see and be seen, where business deals worth millions happened over braised lamb and vintage Bordeaux, where one wrong move could end a career before it started. She found the staff entrance and pushed through heavy wooden doors into a completely different world. The back hallway was narrow and bright with fluorescent lights. Servers rushed past carrying trays, their faces tense with concentration. Someone dropped a fork and cursed under their breath. The kitchen doors swung open, releasing a blast of heat and the sound of Chef Paolo screaming about undercooked potatoes. "You must be Naomi." A tall woman with dark skin and kind eyes approached, extending her hand. "I'm Maya, head hostess. Welcome to Controlled Chaos." Naomi shook her hand, grateful for the warmth. "Thank you. I'm ready to learn." Maya smiled, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Worry, maybe. Come on. I'll introduce you to the manager, and then we'll get you set up." They walked through the maze of back corridors, past storage rooms stacked with wine bottles and linens. Maya explained the basics, table sections, reservation system, the absolute importance of getting orders perfect the first time. But Naomi noticed she kept glancing at her watch, and her smile grew tighter with each passing minute. Manager Elias Ward's office was small and cluttered with paperwork. He was a thin man in his mid-30s with nervous hands that constantly adjusted his tie. When Maya knocked, he looked up and his face brightened briefly before clouding over again. "Naomi Brooks?" He stood, shaking her hand with a grip that was a little too tight. "Welcome. Have a seat." Naomi sat in the chair across from his desk while Maya excused herself. Elias shuffled papers, clicked his pen, cleared his throat twice. Finally, he looked at her directly. "You have excellent references. Your application was impressive. We're very pleased to have you on the team." He paused, and his fingers drummed against the desk. "But I need to be honest with you about something." Naomi's stomach tightened. "Okay, tonight is going to be challenging. We have several VIP reservations, which is normal for us. But one in particular requires extra attention." He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing a dangerous secret. "Vivian Lancaster will be dining with us this evening." The name meant nothing to Naomi, and her face must have shown it because Elias continued quickly. "Mrs. Lancaster is the wife of Charles Lancaster, one of the wealthiest men in the city. They're regular guests here, very important to our business. Mrs. Lancaster has very high standards." He paused again, choosing his words carefully. "She can be demanding. If something isn't perfect, she will let you know." Loudly. "I understand," Naomi said. I'll make sure everything is perfect. I'm sure you will. But I need you to understand something else. His eyes were intense now, almost pleading. Do not upset her. Do not contradict her. Do not speak unless she addresses you directly. If she criticizes you, apologize immediately. If she seems angry, find me. Do you understand? Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. She'd dealt with difficult customers before, but the fear in Elias's voice was real. This wasn't just about good service. This was about survival. I understand, she repeated. Elias exhaled, some tension leaving his shoulders. Good. You'll be assisting in her section tonight. Not lead server, just support. Watch the senior staff and follow their lead exactly. After she left his office, Naomi found Maya in the staff locker room. Two other servers were there too, a young man named Chris and an older woman named Sarah. They were talking in hushed voices that stopped the moment Naomi walked in. He told you about Vivian? Sarah asked. Naomi nodded, opening her assigned locker. Chris laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Then you know you picked literally the worst possible first day. She's not that bad, Naomi said, trying to sound confident. All three of them stared at her, like she just said something incredibly naive. Last month, Sarah said quietly, she made a server cry in the middle of dinner service because her water glass was refilled from the left instead of the right. The girl quit that night. 2 months ago, Chris added, she got someone fired because they smiled at her husband. Just smiled, said the girl was flirting. She owns this place, Maya said, leaning against the lockers. Not legally, but practically. If Vivian decides she doesn't like you, Elias has to let you go. He has no choice. The Lancasters bring in too much business, and Vivian knows it. Naomi's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to stay calm. Then I'll make sure she likes me. Sarah gave her a pitying look. Honey, nobody makes Vivian like them. You just try to stay invisible and pray she's in a good mood. The hours before dinner service flew by in a blur of training. Naomi learned the table layouts, memorized the menu, practiced carrying trays until her arms ached. Chef Paolo emerged from the kitchen long enough to boom at her about respecting his food, then disappeared again in a cloud of garlic-scented steam. Everyone moved with purpose, preparing for the evening rush like soldiers readying for battle. During her break, Naomi slipped outside into the alley behind the restaurant. The cool evening air felt good after the heat of the kitchen. She pulled out her phone and dialed her sister. Naomi. Lily's voice was bright and young and made Naomi's chest ache. How's the fancy new job? It's good. Really good. Naomi forced cheerfulness in her voice. The place is gorgeous, and everyone's been nice. I think I'm going to like it here. That's great. Does this mean, Lily hesitated, does this mean I can go back to school? Naomi closed her eyes. Lily had been out of school for 3 months, while Naomi scrambled to cover their rent after their mother died. The medical bills had eaten everything. Their father had left when Lily was 5. It was just the two of them now, and every decision Naomi made was about keeping them afloat. Yes, Naomi said firmly. I get my first paycheck in 2 weeks. I'll have enough for the tuition and the books you need. Lily squealed, and Naomi could picture her dancing around their tiny apartment. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I promise I'll get good grades. I'll make you proud. You already make me proud, Lily. I'll call you later, okay? I have to get back to work. Okay. Love you. Love you too. Naomi ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the weight settle back on her shoulders. She couldn't lose this job. No matter how difficult Vivian Lancaster was, she had to survive. Lily was depending on her. When she returned inside, the energy had shifted. Dinner service was beginning. The dining room glowed with candlelight. Guests in expensive suits and designer dresses were being seated at tables draped in white linen. Waiters moved efficiently, voices low and professional. Naomi took her position near the kitchen doors, watching Sarah work her section with practiced grace. Everything seemed smooth, controlled, elegant. Then Maya appeared at her elbow, face pale. She's here, Maya whispered. Naomi followed her gaze to the entrance. A woman stood in the doorway, and every head in the restaurant turned to look at her. Vivian Lancaster was stunning. She wore a gold dress that hugged her frame perfectly, catching the light with every small movement. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant twist. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from knowing everyone was watching and loving every second of it. What was her face that struck Naomi most? Beautiful, yes, but sharp. Her eyes swept across the dining room like a queen surveying her kingdom, taking in every detail, judging, measuring, finding flaws. Beside her walked Charles Lancaster. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. Unlike his wife, he didn't seem to notice the stares. His expression was calm, almost detached, as if his thoughts were somewhere far away. Elias materialized out of nowhere, greeting them with an enthusiastic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster, so wonderful to see you. Your table is ready." He led them to the best table in the house, center of the room, positioned so Vivian could see everything. Charles pulled out her chair, and she sat with the grace of someone who'd been sitting in expensive chairs her entire life. "Sarah's taking them," Maya whispered to Naomi. "You're just supporting. Bring water, clear plates, stay quiet." "Got it." Naomi nodded, her heart beating faster than it should. She watched Sarah approach the table with a silver pitcher of water, her smile professional and warm. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster. May I offer you some sparkling water to start?" "Still water," Vivian said without looking at her. "Room temperature. Lemon on the side, not in the glass. And make sure the glasses are spotless. Last time there were watermarks." "Of course, Mrs. Lancaster. My apologies." Sarah returned to the service station, and Naomi saw her hands shaking slightly as she prepared new glasses. "Go take those," Sarah said quietly. "I need a minute." Naomi picked up the tray, balanced it carefully, and approached the Lancaster table. Her training kicked in. Move smoothly, smile gently, don't speak unless necessary. She set the first glass in front of Charles, then moved to Vivian's side. "May I pour your water, ma'am?" Naomi asked politely. Vivian's head turned slowly, and for the first time, those sharp eyes fixed on Naomi. There was a long pause. Naomi felt like she was being examined under a microscope, every flaw magnified. "Do you always speak before you think?" Vivian asked. The words were soft, but they cut through the air like a knife. Nearby guests glanced over. Naomi's hand froze on the pitcher. "Apologize, ma'am. I just wanted to." "Pour the water," Vivian interrupted. "That's what you're here for, isn't it?" Naomi poured, her hand perfectly steady even though her stomach was churning. She set down the pitcher and stepped back, but Vivian wasn't done. "You knew. It wasn't a question." "Yes, ma'am. This is my first day. I can tell." Vivian's smile was thin and cold. "Try to keep up." Laughter rippled around the table. Other diners who'd been listening, enjoying the show. But Charles didn't laugh. He was watching Naomi with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity exactly. Something more like curiosity. Naomi stepped away, her face hot, and returned to the service station where Sarah squeezed her arm sympathetically. "You did fine," she whispered. That was actually mild for her. The rest of the dinner service was a minefield. Every time Naomi approached the table, Vivian found something wrong. The bread wasn't warm enough. The wine was poured too quickly. Naomi's footsteps were too loud. Each criticism was delivered with that same cold precision, designed to cut without causing a scene. But something strange happened. The more Vivian pushed, the calmer Naomi became. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the image of Lily's hopeful face when she talked about going back to school. Whatever it was, Naomi refused to break. "I apologize, Mrs. Lancaster," she said again and again, her voice steady and respectful. "No tears, no trembling, just quiet, unshakable composure." And Charles kept watching. Every insult his wife threw, he observed Naomi's response with those thoughtful eyes. Once, when Vivian was particularly cruel about Naomi forgetting which side to clear a plate from, Charles spoke. "Vivian, the service has been excellent tonight." His wife's expression flickered. Surprise, then something harder. "I was simply providing feedback, darling." "Of course." He turned to Naomi, and his voice gentled. "You're doing fine. Thank you. It was such a small thing. 3 simple words. but coming from him in front of everyone, they carried weight. Naomi nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and returned to the kitchen. She found Elias in the hallway, practically vibrating with anxiety. "How bad is it?" "I'm still employed, so not terrible." He looked at her with something like wonder. "You're the first person in months who hasn't cried or quit during their first Vivian encounter. I've dealt with difficult customers before. Not like her." Elias lowered his voice. "She's trying to break you. That's what she does, finds a new person and tests them until they snap. If you survive tonight, you'll survive anything here." Naomi thought about Lily, about the bills piled on their kitchen counter, about how she dropped out of her hospitality management program when Mom got sick and never went back, about all the dreams she'd folded up and put away because life demanded it. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Later, during a brief lull in service, she locked herself in the staff bathroom and stared at her reflection. Her eyes were tired. Her hair had come slightly loose from its bun, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't broken. "I won't let her break me," she whispered to the mirror. Her reflection stared back, stronger than she'd expected. When the Lancasters finally left, Vivian sweeping out like departing royalty, Charles nodding politely to the staff, the entire restaurant seemed to exhale. Servers slumped against walls. Even Chef Paolo emerged from the kitchen looking drained. "You survived," Sarah said, hugging Naomi. "I am impressed. Genuinely impressed." Chris raised his water glass. To Naomi, "May you have the spine of steel we all wish we had." But Naomi barely heard them. She was too busy watching through the window as Charles helped Vivian into their car, a gleaming black sedan that probably cost more than Naomi would make in 5 years. Just before the door closed, Vivian looked back at the restaurant, her eyes scanning the windows. When they landed on Naomi, she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Naomi went home that night exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sore feet. She climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, unlocked the door quietly in case Lily was asleep, and found her sister curled up on the couch with a textbook. "How was it?" Lily asked, sitting up. Naomi dropped onto the couch beside her. "Intense. But you're okay?" "I am okay." Naomi pulled Lily close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I am okay." That night, she dreamed of chandelier light reflecting off diamonds and cold eyes that saw everything. The next morning, Naomi woke up with one thought. She'd made it through day 1. She could make it through day 2. She was wrong about what day 2 would bring. Vivian Lancaster had decided that Naomi Brooks was a problem, and Vivian didn't allow problems to exist for long. When Naomi arrived for her second shift, the atmosphere in the restaurant felt different. Staff members kept glancing at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Maya pulled her aside before service started. "Vivian was here for lunch," Maya said quietly. Naomi's stomach dropped. "And she asked Elias about you. Want to know where you came from, what your background is, how long you've been hired." "Why would she?" "Because you didn't break," Maya said simply. "You were supposed to quit or cry or mess up so badly that Elias would have an excuse to let you go. But you didn't. And now you're a puzzle she needs to solve." That evening, Vivian arrived earlier than usual. She wore a deep blue dress and carried herself with the same regal bearing. But there was something new in her eyes when she looked at Naomi. Focus. Intent. She requested Sarah's section again, but this time she asked for Naomi specifically. "The new girl," she told Elias, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I want to see if last night was a fluke." Elias sent Naomi over with a look that said, "Be careful." From the moment Naomi approached their table, Vivian launched into attack mode. She sent back her water because it was too cold, complained that Naomi walked too quickly, creating a breeze, insisted her napkin be refolded because Naomi had handed it to her wrong. Charles sat quietly through it all, his expression unreadable. But Naomi caught him watching her again, studying her reactions like she was a particularly interesting book. "You seem very confident for someone so inexperienced," Vivian said after sending back her 3rd glass of wine because the temperature wasn't perfect. "I'm just trying to provide good service, Mrs. Lancaster." "Are you?" Vivian tilted her head. "Or are you trying to prove something?" Naomi met her eyes calmly. I'm trying to do my job well. That's all. Something flickered across Vivian's face. Surprise. Maybe that Naomi had answered directly instead of apologizing. The silence stretched between them, and Naomi could feel other diners watching, waiting to see what would happen. Then Charles spoke. The service has been impeccable, as always. Perhaps we could order. Vivian's attention snapped to her husband, and Naomi saw something dangerous flash in those eyes. But she smiled sweetly and picked up her menu. Back at the service station, Sarah grabbed Naomi's arm. What are you doing? You can't talk back to her like that. I didn't talk back. I just answered her question. Naomi, you don't understand. She's not just being difficult. She's testing you. And the more you stand up to her, the more obsessed she's going to become. Then what am I supposed to do? Apologize for existing. Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, she sighed. Maybe you're braver than the rest of us. Or maybe you just don't know what she's capable of yet. Throughout the evening, Vivian's friend Grace arrived, a woman in her 40s with sharp features and expensive jewelry. She leaned close to Vivian, whispering behind her hand while glancing at Naomi. Who's the new girl? Grace asked, loud enough to carry. Nobody, Vivian said dismissively. Just another waitress who thinks she's special. But her eyes stayed on Naomi, tracking every movement. When Naomi brought their entrees, Vivian accidentally knocked her wine glass over. Red wine splashed across the white tablecloth and onto Vivian's dress. She gasped dramatically, jumping to her feet. Look what you did, she cried out. Naomi's mind raced. She hadn't touched the glass. She'd been reaching for the bread basket on the opposite side. But every guest nearby had turned to look, and the story they'd tell would be that the clumsy new waitress had ruined Vivian Lancaster's evening. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Lancaster, Naomi said immediately, grabbing napkins. Let me help. Don't touch me. Vivian stepped back, her voice rising. You've done enough damage. Elias appeared like magic, apologizing profusely, offering to comp their entire meal, promising the dress would be professionally cleaned at the restaurant's expense. Charles stood and guided his wife toward the restroom, murmuring something soothing that Naomi couldn't hear. But before they left, Charles looked back at Naomi, and then, barely perceptible, he shook his head. Just once, as if to say, this wasn't your fault. After they left, Chris helped Naomi clean up the mess. That was deliberate, he muttered. I saw her. She knocked it over herself. It doesn't matter what really happened, Naomi said tiredly. It matters what people think happened. Yeah, well, I think you're getting screwed. That night, as Naomi was finishing her closing duties, she found Elias in his office with his head in his hands. I'm sorry, he said when she knocked. I know that wasn't your fault. I watched the whole thing. But Mrs. Lancaster has already called to complain, and I have to write up an incident report. Am I getting fired? Not yet. But Naomi, he looked at her with genuine concern. She's going to keep pushing. And eventually, I won't be able to protect you. The Lancasters are too important. Naomi left the restaurant feeling a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes. Frustration. But also something else. A stubborn determination that surprised her. Vivian wanted her gone. Expected her to quit. To give up. Naomi had spent the last year watching her mother die slowly, fighting insurance companies, holding her sister while Lily cried, and somehow keeping both of them fed and housed. She'd given up her dreams once already. She wasn't giving up this job. Over the next week, Vivian became relentless. She came to the restaurant 4 times, far more than usual, according to the staff. Each visit was a new test, a new attempt to break Naomi down. She criticized Naomi's appearance, saying her hair was unkempt, even though it was perfectly neat. She complained about Naomi's voice being grating. She made increasingly impossible demands, then acted disappointed when Naomi couldn't read her mind. But something unexpected began to happen. The other staff members started rallying around Naomi. Sarah showed her tricks for dealing with difficult customers. Chris ran interference when Vivian's demands got too outrageous. Even Chef Paolo, who yelled at everyone equally, started calling Naomi the only one with a backbone in this whole damn place. You know what I think? Paolo said one night, ladling soup with aggressive efficiency. I think Mrs. High and Mighty is scared of you. Scared? Of me? Naomi laughed. Why would she be scared? Because you don't bow down. Everyone else treats her like a queen, but you treat her like a customer. Rich people hate that. Makes them feel ordinary. Naomi had never thought about it that way. But maybe Paolo was right. Maybe what bothered Vivian wasn't that Naomi was rude or incompetent. It was that she refused to act inferior. The tipping point came on a particularly busy Friday night. Every table was full, reservation requests were being turned away, and the kitchen was slammed. Vivian arrived without a reservation, expecting her usual table. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lancaster," Maya said carefully. "We're completely booked tonight, but we have a lovely table near the window." "I don't want a window table. I want my table. It's occupied right now, but it should be available in about 45 minutes. I want it now." Maya looked helplessly at Elias, who was already sweating. They were about to displace a family celebrating their daughter's graduation when Naomi stepped forward. "Mrs. Lancaster, may I show you to the window table while you wait? It has a beautiful view, and I can bring you champagne right away on the house." Vivian's eyes locked onto Naomi like a predator spotting prey. "I didn't ask for your opinion." "I know, ma'am. I'm just trying to help. If you wanted to help, you'd get me my table." "I understand your frustration," Naomi said calmly. "But that table is currently occupied by guests who also have a reservation. I promise the window table is just as lovely." "Are you arguing with me?" The restaurant had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. "No, ma'am. I'm offering you the best option we have available." Vivian stepped closer, and Naomi could smell her expensive perfume. "You're very bold for someone in your position." "I'm just doing my job." "Your job is to do what I tell you." "My job is to serve all our guests equally and well." The words hung in the air. Naomi could feel Elias's panic from across the room. But she didn't back down, didn't apologize. She just stood there, meeting Vivian's furious gaze with quiet steadiness. Finally, Charles touched his wife's arm. "Vivian, let's just take the window table. We're causing a scene." For a moment, Naomi thought Vivian might explode. Her face was flushed, her jaw tight. But then she smiled, that cold, dangerous smile that made Naomi's skin prickle. "Of course, darling. The window table will be fine." She looked at Naomi. "For now." As Naomi led them to their table, she heard Grace whisper to Vivian, "She's got some nerve, that one." "She certainly does," Vivian replied softly. "But nerve can be broken." Charles caught Naomi's eye as she handed him a menu, and this time his expression was clearer. Respect, maybe, or warning. She couldn't tell which. That night, after service ended, Naomi collapsed in the break room. Her feet ached, her head pounded, and she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. But she'd made it through another shift. She was still here. Sarah sat down beside her. "You know she's never going to stop, right? This isn't going to get better." "I know," Naomi said. "Then why do you keep fighting back? Why not just apologize and let her win?" Naomi thought about Lily, who'd sent her a text earlier that day. "Got an A on my math test. Thanks for believing in me." She thought about her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them in their apartment, who'd taught Naomi that dignity wasn't something you could afford to lose. She thought about the hospitality degree she'd never finished, the dreams that felt further away with every passing year. "Because if I let her break me," Naomi said quietly, "then what's the point of any of this?" Sarah squeezed her hand. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most stubborn. Can it be both?" Sarah laughed, and some of the tension broke. But as Naomi walked home that night, she couldn't shake the memory of Vivian's smile. Cold, calculating, victorious, like she knew something Naomi didn't. Like the real game was just beginning. In her luxury penthouse across the city, Vivian stood at her bedroom window, glass of wine in hand, staring out at the glittering skyline. Grace's words kept echoing in her mind. "Charles seems very interested in that little waitress of yours." It was ridiculous, of course. Charles would never risk his reputation, his business empire, his carefully crafted life for some nobody in a cheap uniform. But Vivian hadn't survived in this world by ignoring threats. And Naomi Brooks was becoming a threat. "What are you thinking about?" Charles asked, emerging from the bathroom. "Nothing important," Vivian said smoothly. "Just planning our week." But as she climbed into their designer bed, her mind was already working, planning, strategizing, finding the weak points she could exploit. Everyone had a breaking point. She just needed to find Naomi's. The weeks that followed saw Vivian's obsession with Naomi grow into something darker, more calculated. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Vivian would be hosting a private dinner at Le Montclair for the city's most elite socialites, a carefully curated event that would showcase her influence and power. When the reservation list was posted, every staff member's heart sank. 20 guests, 5 courses, and Naomi was assigned to the Lancaster table. She requested you specifically, Elias told Naomi, his face pale as paper. I tried to change it, but she insisted. Said she wanted to give you an opportunity to prove yourself. Chris shook his head. That's not an opportunity. That's a trap. He wasn't wrong. Naomi could see it in the way Vivian smiled when she arrived that evening, Grace trailing behind her like a shadow. The dining room had been transformed into something even more spectacular than usual. White orchids on every table, crystal glassware that caught the candlelight like stars, and an atmosphere thick with anticipation. The guests were exactly what Naomi expected. Women dripping with jewelry who air-kissed instead of hugging. Men in suits worth more than cars. Everyone spoke in measured tones about charity galas and vacation homes and investments, their laughter polished and precise. This wasn't just dinner. This was theater, and Vivian was the director. Charles arrived separately, looking tired in a way his expensive suit couldn't hide. He nodded at Naomi as he took his seat beside his wife, and something in his eyes looked almost apologetic. "Good evening, Mrs. Lancaster," Naomi said, approaching their table with water. "May I?" "Not yet," Vivian interrupted without looking up. "Wait until I'm ready." Naomi stepped back and waited. And waited. 5 minutes passed while Vivian chatted with Grace about a recent art auction. 10 minutes. Naomi stood there, tray in hand, while other servers cast her sympathetic glances. Finally, Vivian turned to her. "Now you may pour." Naomi poured the water without a word, her hand perfectly steady. "You'll be serving our table tonight," Vivian announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I specifically requested you. I believe in giving new staff opportunities to shine." The words sounded generous, but Naomi heard the threat beneath them. This wasn't an opportunity. This was Vivian setting the stage for a very public humiliation. Throughout the first course, Vivian gave contradictory instructions. She wanted her salad dressing on the side, then complained it should have been mixed in. She asked for extra bread, then acted annoyed when Naomi brought it. Each time, she delivered her criticism with a smile that made it seem like Naomi was simply incompetent rather than being deliberately set up to fail. "The new girl is trying her best," Vivian said to Grace, loud enough for the table to hear, "though I'm not sure she's quite ready for this level of service." Grace giggled. "Well, you can't expect everyone to meet your standards, darling." Naomi cleared the salad plates and returned to the kitchen, where Chef Paolo was plating the second course with his usual dramatic flair. "She's torturing you out there," he said, not looking up from his work. "I know. You gonna quit?" "No." "Good." He slid 2 perfectly arranged plates across the counter. "They make me proud. Don't let that which break you." Back in the dining room, Naomi served the second course, seared scallops with a delicate citrus glaze. She'd memorized everyone's dietary restrictions, knew exactly who was allergic to shellfish, had triple-checked every detail. But as she placed Vivian's plate in front of her, Vivian's face twisted into an expression of disgust. "This isn't what I ordered." Naomi's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lancaster." The menu listed. "I specifically said no shellfish. Didn't I tell you that?" She hadn't. Naomi would have remembered, would have noted it, would have told the kitchen. But before she could respond, Vivian was already turning to her guests with an exasperated sigh. "I suppose I wasn't clear enough. My fault for assuming competence." The word stung designed to. Naomi took the plate back. "I'll have the kitchen prepare something else immediately. Don't bother. I've lost my appetite." In the kitchen, Naomi found Elias waiting with his phone pressed to his ear, probably already getting an earful from someone. Sarah touched her arm sympathetically. "She did order the scallops," Sarah whispered. I took the reservation myself. She's lying. I know. So why aren't you defending yourself? Naomi thought about it. She could make a scene, could insist on checking the written order, could call Vivian a liar in front of all those important people. But what would that accomplish? Vivian wanted her to break, to lose control, to prove she wasn't suited for this world. Because defending myself won't change anything, Naomi said quietly. But staying calm might. The third course went more smoothly, or so Naomi thought. She'd anticipated Vivian's tricks, stayed 3 steps ahead, made sure every detail was perfect. But then came the wine service. Vivian had ordered a specific vintage, a bottle that cost more than Naomi's monthly rent. As Naomi poured, following the exact protocol she'd been taught, Vivian held up her hand. Too fast. You're pouring too fast. Naomi slowed down. Now you're going too slow. Has no one taught you proper wine service? Naomi finished pouring, her jaw tight. Around the table, guests were starting to shift uncomfortably. Even in this crowd, Vivian's cruelty was becoming obvious. Charles cleared his throat. Vivian, the wine is fine. I wasn't asking for your opinion, darling. Nevertheless, his voice was calm but firm. The service has been excellent all evening. Perhaps we should focus on enjoying the meal. Something dangerous flickered across Vivian's face. In that moment, Naomi realized this wasn't just about her. This was about something deeper between Charles and Vivian, some power struggle that had been brewing long before Naomi ever walked through Le Montclair's doors. Of course, Vivian said, her smile brittle. How silly of me. But her eyes promised revenge. During the main course, Naomi felt the tension ratcheting higher with every passing moment. Vivian's questions became sharper, her demands more impossible. She asked Naomi to explain the preparation of the duck in detail, then interrupted her answer to say she was boring the guests. She dropped her napkin repeatedly, making Naomi bend down to retrieve it again and again. Grace watched it all with barely concealed delight, occasionally adding her own small cruelties. You poor thing, working so hard. This job must be exhausting for someone so inexperienced. Naomi smiled politely. I enjoy the challenge. Do you? Vivian's tone was sharp. How admirable. Tell me, what did you do before this? The question felt like a trap, but Naomi answered honestly. I was studying hospitality management. I had to leave school to take care of family matters. How unfortunate. Vivian's expression showed no sympathy. So you have no formal training, no real experience, and yet here you are serving the city's most distinguished guests. I'm learning every day, ma'am. Clearly not fast enough. The conversation around the table had died. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see what would happen next. Naomi could feel her control slipping, could feel the anger building in her chest. But she thought of Lily, thought of the bills waiting at home, thought of everything she'd already survived. I apologize if my service hasn't met your expectations, Mrs. Lancaster. I'm doing my best. Your best. Vivian laughed. It was a cold sound. How American. As if effort matters more than results. That was when Charles stood up. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with a quiet finality that drew every eye in the room. Excuse me, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. I need some air. He walked toward the terrace doors, and Naomi watched him go, confused. Vivian's face had gone white, then red, her carefully maintained composure cracking just slightly. Well, she said, her voice too bright. My husband seems to have forgotten his manners tonight. As dessert was being prepared, Vivian excused herself to use the restroom. Grace leaned across the table toward the other guests and stage whispered, She's been so stressed lately. You know how it is. But Naomi noticed the glances exchanged between the socialites. Sympathy was shifting away from Vivian. The public nature of her cruelty was finally catching up with her. When Vivian returned, her makeup was freshly touched up, but her eyes were harder than ever. She took her seat and smiled at Naomi with such venom that it made Naomi's skin crawl. Dessert service, please. And do try not to ruin it. Naomi brought out the chocolate soufflés, delicate masterpieces that Chef Paolo had crafted with care. She placed them gently in front of each guest, saving Vivian for last. As she set down the final plate, Vivian reached out suddenly. Later, Naomi would wonder if Vivian had planned all along. If every insult, every impossible demand, every public humiliation had been building to this single moment. Because when Vivian's hand shot out toward Naomi's wrist, there was something calculated in her eyes. Something that said she was about to create a scene that would justify firing Naomi forever. But Naomi's reflexes, honed by months of carrying heavy trays through crowded restaurants, were faster than Vivian expected. Her hand came up instinctively, blocking Vivian's grab with a gentle but firm pressure that stopped the motion cold. Time seemed to freeze. Vivian's hand hung in the air between them, blocked by Naomi's steady grip. The restaurant fell silent. Somewhere, a fork clattered against a plate. A woman gasped. Grace's mouth fell open. Naomi looked directly into Vivian's eyes and spoke in a voice that was quiet but carried across the entire room. "Ma'am, please don't touch the staff." The words weren't angry or defensive. They were simply factual, professional, and completely unshakable. Naomi gently released Vivian's hand and stepped back, her expression neutral. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. The socialites stared. The other servers had stopped in their tracks. Even Chef Paolo had emerged from the kitchen and stood frozen in the doorway. Then Charles returned from the terrace, took in the scene with one sweeping glance, and said 2 words that changed everything. "Good girl." He said it so quietly that only those at the immediate table heard him. But the approval in his voice was unmistakable. Vivian's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, humiliation, something that looked almost like fear. Her carefully constructed mask shattered completely. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "You're fired," she screamed, pointing at Naomi with a shaking hand. "You just assaulted me in front of witnesses. I want her arrested. I want." "She's not fired." Charles's voice was cold, final. He looked at his wife with an expression that made several guests shift uncomfortably. "And she didn't assault anyone. She defended herself from being grabbed, which, if I recall correctly, is against several employment laws." Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Charles, you can't be serious." "I'm perfectly serious." The young woman asked you politely not to touch her. "That seems reasonable to me. I'm your wife." "Which gives you many privileges," Charles said quietly, "but not the right to physically grab employees." The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Naomi stood completely still, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. Elias looked like he might faint. The socialites were whispering behind their hands, already composing the stories they'd tell at brunch tomorrow. Grace tried to salvage the situation. "I'm sure Vivian didn't mean anything by it. She was just trying to get the girl's attention." "I know exactly what she meant," Charles interrupted. He turned to Naomi, and his eyes were kind. "I apologize on behalf of my wife. Your service tonight has been exemplary, and you handled a difficult situation with grace." Then he turned back to Vivian. "We're leaving now." Vivian looked around the table at her guests, her friends, her social circle, the people whose opinions shaped her entire world. She saw the judgment in their eyes, the pity, the scandal spreading like wildfire. This dinner was supposed to cement her status. Instead, it had exposed her. "This isn't over," she hissed at Naomi as she gathered her purse. "Yes," Charles said firmly, "it is." He guided his wife toward the exit, his hand on her elbow more restraining than gentle. As they left, the restaurant erupted into whispered conversations. Some guests stayed to finish dessert, eager to witness the aftermath. Others made quick excuses and left, already pulling out their phones. Naomi stood in the middle of it all, shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Sarah rushed over and hugged her. "I can't believe you just did that," she whispered. "I can't either." Elias approached cautiously. "Are you all right?" "I think so." Naomi's voice was unsteady. "Am I really fired?" "I don't think anyone except Mr. Lancaster has the authority to make that decision," Elias said slowly. And he seemed pretty clear about his position. Chef Paolo appeared with a glass of water. "Drink this. You look like you're about to pass out." Naomi drank, her hands trembling. Around her, The staff had formed a protective circle, their faces showing a mixture of awe and worry. She'd just done what none of them had ever dared to do. She'd stood up to Vivian Lancaster in front of the entire elite society and lived to tell about it. The question was, what would happen next? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Within hours, the story spread through the city like wildfire. By the next morning, gossip columns were buzzing with blind items about a socialite's public meltdown at an exclusive restaurant. By afternoon, phone videos taken by guests had been shared in private group chats. By evening, the whispers had reached every corner of high society. Vivian Lancaster had lost control, had screamed at a waitress, had tried to grab her, had been contradicted by her own husband in front of everyone who mattered. For a woman whose entire identity was built on maintaining perfect composure and absolute social dominance, it was a catastrophe. Naomi didn't go into work the next day. Elias had called her and suggested she take a day off while things settled down. She spent the time in her apartment, jumping at every phone notification, wondering if she still had a job, wondering if Vivian would find some way to destroy her anyway. Lily made her tea and sat beside her on the couch. You stood up for yourself. That's not something to regret. I know, but I'm scared. Of what? Naomi thought about it. Of what comes next. Women like Vivian Lancaster don't just accept defeat. They retaliate. She was right to be scared. That evening, Elias called. You need to come in tomorrow. Mr. Lancaster wants to speak with you. Naomi's blood ran cold. About what? He didn't say. But Naomi, Elias paused. I don't think it's bad. He specifically requested a private meeting in his office. That's not how people get fired. Then what is it? I don't know. But I think there's more going on here than any of us understand. The next morning, Naomi dressed in her best outfit. A simple black dress that was professional without being expensive. She arrived at Le Montclair 2 hours before her shift was supposed to start and was directed to a private office on the 3rd floor she'd never seen before. Charles Lancaster sat behind an enormous desk, reading through papers. When she knocked, he looked up and gestured for her to enter. Miss Brooks, thank you for coming. Please sit down. Naomi sat, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from shaking. Charles studied her for a moment, and she noticed how tired he looked. There were lines around his eyes that seemed deeper than before, and his expression carried a weight that had nothing to do with business. I owe you an apology, he said finally. That was not what Naomi had expected. Sir, I've been aware of my wife's behavior for a long time. The way she treats staff, the way she uses intimidation to maintain control. I made excuses for it, ignored it, told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. He leaned back in his chair. But what happened the other night was inexcusable, and I'm sorry you were put in that position. I appreciate that, Naomi said carefully. But with all due respect, I'm more concerned about whether I still have a job. A slight smile crossed his face. You do. In fact, I'd like to offer you a promotion. Naomi blinked. I am sorry. I've been watching you since your first day. The way you handle pressure, the way you maintain your composure, the way you treat people with respect regardless of how they treat you. Those are rare qualities, Miss Brooks. Qualities this restaurant could benefit from in a leadership position. I've only been here a few weeks, and in those few weeks, you've shown more integrity than people who've been here for years. He pulled out a folder. I'm offering you a position as assistant manager, working directly under Elias. The salary is substantially higher, and it comes with opportunities for further advancement. Naomi's mind reeled. This couldn't be real. Mr. Lancaster, I don't understand. Why would you do this? His expression grew serious. Because I need people around me I can trust. And because he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. My wife is under investigation for some serious financial irregularities. Fraud, to be specific. The night of the dinner, when she tried to grab you, she was attempting to retrieve a receipt she dropped. A receipt you saw her sign. Naomi's heart began to pound. I don't remember. You may not have realized what it was. But I need to know, did you see her with any papers that night? Anything she seemed anxious about? Naomi thought back. There had been a moment, just before Vivian tried to grab her, when she'd been stuffing something back into her purse. Naomi had assumed it was just a compact or lipstick. She had papers, Naomi said slowly. She was putting them away quickly, like she didn't want anyone to see. Charles nodded. Those papers were forged charity documents, proof that she's been embezzling from several foundations. When you blocked her hand, she panicked because she thought you might have seen what they were. Mr. Lancaster, I didn't see anything specific. I certainly didn't know. I know you didn't, but my wife doesn't know that. Which means, he looked at her directly. She's going to see you as a threat now. Not just an annoying waitress, but a potential witness. Fear crawled up Naomi's spine. What does that mean? It means you're in danger. Charles pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the desk. This is the number for my personal attorney. If anything happens, if Vivian approaches you, if you feel threatened, if anything seems wrong, you call this number immediately. Naomi picked up the card with trembling fingers. Why are you telling me this? Because I've spent 15 years watching my wife destroy people for her own amusement. I've looked the other way because it was easier than confronting her, because our marriage was a business arrangement more than anything else, because I convinced myself her victims could handle themselves. He looked older suddenly, burdened. But you're different. You're honest. And I won't let her destroy you, like she's destroyed so many others. If you know she's committed fraud, why haven't you turned her in yourself? I tried. 3 times over the past 5 years. Each time, she found a way to make the evidence disappear or discredit the witnesses. She has connections, resources, and absolutely no conscience about using them. He stood up and walked to the window. But this time is different. This time, there are multiple investigations happening simultaneously. State auditors, federal agencies, board members who've finally grown suspicious. The walls are closing in, and she knows it. And you think she'll come after me? I think she'll do whatever it takes to protect herself, which means anyone she perceives as a threat is at risk. Naomi stood up, her legs unsteady. Mr. Lancaster, I appreciate the job offer and the warning, but I need to think about this. Of course, take all the time you need. He turned back to her. But Miss Brooks, Naomi, please be careful. My wife is most dangerous when she's cornered. As Naomi left his office and walked down the stairs, her mind spun with everything she'd just learned. She thought this was just about a cruel woman and an unlucky waitress. But it was so much bigger than that. Fraud. Investigations. Danger. She pulled out her phone and called Lily. Hey, her sister answered. How'd it go? I need to tell you something. Back in the restaurant, staff members watched Naomi descend the stairs, trying to read her expression. Sarah rushed over the moment she reached the main floor. What happened? Are you okay? I'm Fina. I still have my job. Thank God. Sarah hugged her. We were all terrified. Half the staff was ready to quit if they fired you. The words warmed Naomi more than she could express. A month ago, she'd been the new girl nobody wanted to train. Now, people were willing to risk their jobs for her. There's something else, Naomi said. Charles offered me a promotion. Assistant manager. Sarah's eyes went wide. Are you serious? I don't know if I should take it. Are you insane? Of course you should take it. But Naomi wasn't sure. Taking the promotion meant stepping further into Vivian's line of fire. It meant accepting Charles's protection, which came with strings attached. It meant getting involved in something that sounded increasingly dangerous. Over the next few days, the atmosphere at Montclair shifted dramatically. Word had spread about Naomi's confrontation with Vivian, and suddenly she wasn't just the brave new waitress. She was a symbol, proof that Vivian could be challenged. Staff members who'd spent years walking on eggshells around the Lancasters started standing a little straighter. But with empowerment came danger. Grace arrived for lunch one afternoon and made a point of sitting in Naomi's section. I heard about your promotion, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. How fortunate for you. I'm still considering it, Naomi replied neutrally. Are you? Grace leaned forward. Let me give you some advice, dear. Vivian doesn't forget, and she certainly doesn't forgive. Whatever Charles is offering you, it's not worth making an enemy of her. I haven't made an enemy of anyone. I'm just trying to do my job. That's what they all say. Grace's expression hardened, right before Vivian destroys them. That night, as Naomi was locking up the restaurant, she noticed a black car parked across the street. It had been there when she arrived and was still there now. When she started walking toward the bus stop, the car's engine started. She remembered Charles's warning and pulled out the card he'd given her. But before she could dial, Chef Paolo appeared beside her. "Come on," he said. "I'll give you a ride home." "You don't have to. That car's been circling for an hour. I'm not letting you walk alone." In Paolo's beat-up Honda, Naomi felt safer. But as they pulled away from the restaurant, she watched the black car in the side mirror. It followed them for 3 blocks before turning off. "You're in trouble," Paolo said bluntly. "Big trouble." "I know. So what are you going to do?" Naomi thought about Lily waiting at home, about the bills that never stopped coming, about the dreams she'd put on hold and the future that still felt impossibly far away, about the choice in front of her: stay silent and hope Vivian forgot about her, or step forward and risk everything. "I'm going to accept Charles's offer," she said finally, "and then I'm going to help him take her down." Paolo glanced at her, surprised. "You sure about that?" "No," Naomi admitted, "but I'm sure that hiding won't keep me safe. She already sees me as a threat. I might as well actually be one." He laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You got guts, kid. Stupid, crazy guts." When Naomi got home, she found Elias had called twice and left voicemails. The last one said simply, "Call me back. It's urgent." She dialed, and he answered on the first ring. "Naomi, thank God. Someone broke into the restaurant tonight." Her blood turned cold. "What?" After closing, security footage shows a woman in a hood. She went straight for the office, straight for the filing cabinets. She was looking for something. Did she find it? I don't know. "But Naomi," she asked the night guard about you. Asked what shift you worked, where you lived. Naomi looked at the deadbolt on her apartment door and suddenly felt very vulnerable. "I'm calling the police," Elias continued. "And I'm calling Mr. Lancaster. But you need to be careful. Lock your doors. Don't go anywhere alone." After she hung up, Naomi sat in the dark living room, watching shadows move across the ceiling. Lily was asleep in the next room, innocent and safe for now. But for how long? She pulled out Charles's card and dialed the number for his attorney. A woman answered. "Donovan Legal Group. My name is Naomi Brooks. Charles Lancaster told me to call if I was in trouble. Hold, please." 60 seconds later, a man's voice came on the line. "Miss Brooks, this is Marcus Donovan. Mr. Lancaster briefed me about your situation. Tell me what's happened." Naomi told him everything. The break-in, the car following her, Grace's veiled threats. When she finished, there was a pause. "Miss Brooks, I'm going to be direct with you. You're now a potential witness in a federal fraud investigation. That makes you valuable to multiple parties, some of whom don't have your best interests at heart. I'm arranging for security to watch your building starting tonight. I can't afford. Mr. Lancaster is covering it. He's also prepared to put you and your sister in a safe house if necessary." The weight of it all crashed down on her. A month ago, she just wanted a job. Now she had lawyers and bodyguards and a woman who'd committed fraud looking for her. "What do I do?" Naomi asked, her voice small. "You keep your head down and you trust that we're building a case. Vivian Lancaster is going to face consequences for what she's done. But these things take time." "How much time?" "Weeks, maybe months." Naomi closed her eyes. "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, you stay alert, you stay safe, and you remember that you're not alone in this." After the call ended, Naomi sat in the darkness for a long time. She thought about the girl who'd walked into Le Montclair 4 weeks ago, nervous and hopeful and naive. That girl was gone now. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood that survival sometimes meant fighting back. The next morning, she called Elias and accepted the promotion. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure. Vivian is going to lose her mind when she hears." "Good," Naomi said. "Let her. Because if she was going to be a target anyway, she might as well make it count." Naomi's first week as assistant manager should have been exciting. Instead, it felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. The promotion came with a small office, a modest salary increase, and responsibilities that included staff scheduling and vendor coordination. More importantly, it came with a target painted firmly on her back. Vivian hadn't shown her face at Le Montclair since the disastrous dinner party. But her presence lingered like smoke in the whispered phone calls Elias received, in the way certain wealthy guests suddenly canceled their reservations, in the tension that gripped the staff every time the front door opened. "She's planning something," Sarah said during a quiet moment between lunch and dinner service. "You can feel it." Naomi could feel it too, like the air before a storm, heavy and electric with the promise of violence. The storm broke on a Thursday evening. Naomi was reviewing inventory in the wine cellar when she heard the crash. Glass shattering, someone screaming, chaos erupting from the dining room above. She ran up the stairs, her heart hammering, and found the scene already in motion. A wine bottle lay shattered on the marble floor, deep red liquid spreading across white stone like blood. Expensive wine. Naomi recognized the label even broken. $12,000 worth of vintage Bordeaux, now soaking into the grout between tiles. And standing in the middle of it all, looking shocked and horrified, was Vivian Lancaster. "Oh my God," Vivian gasped, her hand pressed to her chest. "I cannot believe Elias." Elias. The manager appeared within seconds, his face already pale. "Mrs. Lancaster, what happened?" "That girl." Vivian pointed at Naomi with a trembling finger. "I was simply walking past when she came rushing down the hallway, carrying that bottle. She wasn't watching where she was going and practically ran into me. The bottle went flying and," she gestured at the destruction, "look at this mess." Naomi's mouth fell open. "That's not what happened. I wasn't even. Are you calling me a liar?" Vivian's voice rose, pitched perfectly for the dozen diners watching from nearby tables. "I was nearly injured. That bottle could have hit me. Mrs. Lancaster, I was downstairs in the wine cellar. I didn't bring any bottle upstairs. I couldn't have." "Elias." Vivian turned to the manager, ignoring Naomi completely. "I want this addressed immediately. This is dangerous negligence. Someone could have been seriously hurt." Grace materialized from the dining room, right on cue. "I saw the whole thing," she announced, her voice carrying. The girl was rushing, not paying attention. Vivian barely got out of the way in time. "That's not true," Naomi said, her voice rising despite her attempts to stay calm. "I was in the cellar. Ask anyone. The security footage will show everything," Elias said quickly, pulling out his phone. "Let me just pull it up and we can see exactly what." "The cameras in this hallway malfunctioned this afternoon," Vivian interrupted smoothly. "I mentioned it to the evening manager. Apparently nothing was done about it." Naomi's blood turned to ice. Of course the cameras weren't working. Of course Vivian had made sure of that before executing her plan. "There are other cameras," Naomi said desperately. "The wine cellar has cameras. They'll show I never left with a bottle." "Will they?" Vivian's smile was cold. "How convenient that you know exactly where all the cameras are. Almost like you were planning to do something that needed to avoid surveillance." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Naomi could see the doubt creeping into Elias's eyes, the way nearby staff members exchanged uncertain glances. This was Vivian's specialty, creating a narrative that sounded plausible enough that people wanted to believe it. "I need to speak with you in my office," Elias said quietly to Naomi. "Now." "But I didn't." "Office. Now." As Naomi followed him through the restaurant, she caught sight of Charles entering through the front door. He took in the scene with one glance. The broken glass, his wife's dramatic distress, Naomi's pale face, and his expression darkened. Elias's office felt suffocating. The manager sat behind his desk, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Naomi stood, unwilling to sit, her mind racing through what had just happened. "Tell me the truth," Elias said. "Were you carrying that bottle?" "No, I was in the wine cellar doing inventory. I hadn't brought anything upstairs yet." "Can anyone confirm that?" "I was alone." "But Elias, you know me. You know I wouldn't." The door opened and Charles walked in, followed by Vivian. His wife's distress had transformed into cold fury, her perfect mask back in place. "I want her fired," Vivian announced. "Immediately." "That's not your decision," Charles said quietly. "She nearly injured me with her carelessness. She destroyed $12,000 worth of wine. She lied about her involvement. What more evidence do you need?" "I need actual evidence," Charles replied. "Not theatrical accusations." "Are you seriously defending her again?" Vivian's voice climbed higher. Your obsession with this waitress is becoming embarrassing, Charles. Everyone's noticed. Everyone's talking. Let them talk. She assaulted me at the dinner party. Now she's destroying property. And you keep protecting her like she's... Vivian stopped, but the implication hung in the air, poisonous and deliberate. Like she's what? Charles's voice was dangerously quiet. Like she matters more than your own wife. The silence that followed was arctic. Naomi wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and escape this nightmare. She'd walked into a trap that was about so much more than a broken wine bottle. I'll review the security footage personally, Charles said finally. All of it. Every camera in this building. And then we'll discuss what actually happened. The footage won't show anything, Vivian said confidently. The cameras malfunctioned. All of them. Charles raised an eyebrow. How remarkably unlucky. Something flickered across Vivian's face. Uncertainty, maybe your fear. What are you implying? I'm implying that I find the timing suspicious. He turned to Elias. Put Miss Brooks on temporary leave while we investigate. Paid leave, he added, cutting off Vivian's protest. This is a personnel matter and will be handled according to company policy. Charles, this conversation is over, Vivian. Go home. His wife's expression promised retribution, but she swept out of the office with her head held high. Grace followed, shooting Naomi a look that might have been sympathy or satisfaction. It was impossible to tell. After they left, Charles turned to Naomi. You didn't break that bottle. No, sir. I know, but proving it may take time. He glanced at Elias. There's a secondary camera system I had installed 3 months ago. Vivian doesn't know about it. It backs up to an external server. Hope flared in Naomi's chest. So there's footage? There should be, but I need to access it carefully. If Vivian discovers it exists, she'll find a way to destroy it. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Marcus, I need you to secure footage from the restaurant's backup security system. Tonight. Yes, all of it. He ended the call and looked at Naomi with something like apology in his eyes. Go home. Stay there. Don't answer the door for anyone except my security team. I'll call you when we have proof. Naomi left through the back in trance, feeling like a criminal even though she'd done nothing wrong. Chef Paolo was waiting in the alley with his car already running. Heard what happened, he said. Come on. I'm not letting you take the bus. During the drive, Naomi's phone buzzed continuously. Messages from concerned coworkers, a missed call from an unknown number, 3 texts from Lily asking if she was okay. She answered her sister first. Everything's fine. Home soon. Love you. But everything wasn't fine. She'd been framed, suspended, and caught in the middle of a war between a millionaire and his criminal wife. Nothing about this was fine. At home, Lily met her at the door with worry etched across her young face. What happened? Sarah called and said you might be fired. I'm not fired. Just on leave while they investigate something. Naomi forced a smile. It's going to be okay. You're lying. I'm hopeful, Naomi corrected. Which is different. That night, sleep was impossible. Naomi lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. Vivian's performance had been flawless. The shock, the accusation, the wounded innocence. Grace's timing as a witness had been perfect. They planned it down to the minute, eliminating the cameras and creating a narrative that would be impossible to disprove without video evidence. But Charles had that evidence. If the backup system worked, if the footage was clear, if it showed what really happened. Too many ifs. Too many ways this could still go wrong. Her phone rang at 2 in the morning. Charles's number. We have the footage, he said without preamble. And it's exactly what I expected. Naomi sat up, her heart racing. What does it show? Vivian entering the hallway alone, carrying the bottle herself. She looks directly at the camera, the one she thought was disabled, and smashes the bottle against the wall. Then she positions herself in the mess and waits for you to come upstairs so she can start screaming. Relief flooded through Naomi so intensely she felt lightheaded. So I'm cleared. You're cleared. But Naomi, his voice grew serious. This proves she's desperate. Desperate enough to commit a crime just to frame you. That makes her exponentially more dangerous. What happens now? Now we use this. The footage shows criminal destruction of property, filing a false report, and conspiracy. Combined with the fraud investigation, it's another nail in her coffin. After the call ended, Naomi finally slept. But her dreams were troubled, filled with broken glass and cold eyes and the feeling of walls closing in. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Naomi woke to find 3 missed calls from Elias, 2 from Sarah, and 1 from a number that showed up as Donovan Legal Group. She called the attorney first. "Miss Brooks," Marcus Donovan said, "I'm calling to inform you that someone attempted to access your apartment building last night. Security stopped them, but we believe it was Grace Meyer acting on Vivian's behalf." Naomi's hand tightened on the phone. "What do they want?" "We don't know. But Mr. Lancaster has arranged for you and your sister to move to a secure location temporarily. A car will arrive in 1 hour to transport you." "Wait, I can't just leave." "You can and you will. Miss Brooks, Vivian Lancaster is under investigation by federal authorities. She knows her empire is crumbling. That makes her unpredictable and dangerous. Your safety is not negotiable." The car arrived exactly when promised. A black SUV with tinted windows and a driver who introduced himself only as Marcus's associate. He drove them to a luxury apartment building across town, where a furnished 2-bedroom unit waited with enough food stock to last a week. "This is insane," Lily whispered, staring at the marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. "This is like something from a movie." "I know. Naomi, what exactly did you get us into?" That was the question, wasn't it? Naomi had just won a job. Instead, she'd stumbled into fraud, conspiracy, and a war between 2 people whose wealth and power operated on a level she could barely comprehend. That afternoon, investigators came to interview her. 2 federal agents in dark suits who asked detailed questions about every interaction she'd had with Vivian. They were particularly interested in the night of the dinner party, the papers Vivian had been stuffing into her purse, the receipt Charles had mentioned. "Did you see what was written on the documents?" the female agent asked. "No, I only saw her putting them away quickly. I didn't know they were important." "But you could testify that she had documents and seemed anxious about them." "Yes." The agents exchanged glances. The male agent leaned forward. "Miss Brooks, we're building a case against Vivian Lancaster for embezzling from 3 charitable foundations. The amounts total over $6 million. Your testimony, combined with the financial records we've obtained, could help secure a conviction." $6 million. The number was so large Naomi could barely process it. "What do you need from me?" "For now, just stay safe. When we move forward with charges, we may ask you to testify before a grand jury. But that could be weeks or months away." After they left, Naomi stood at the window watching the city below. Somewhere out there, Vivian was planning her next move. Somewhere out there, Grace was probably helping her. And somewhere out there, Charles was orchestrating the fall of the woman he'd married 15 years ago. The call came from an unexpected source 3 days later. Grace Meyer, crying so hard Naomi could barely understand her. "I need to talk to you," Grace sobbed. "Please. I have information." "About what?" "About Vivian. About everything she's done. I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't be part of this anymore." They met in a coffee shop downtown, Grace looking 10 years older than she had a week ago. Her makeup was smudged, her designer clothes wrinkled, her hands shaking as she gripped her latte. "She turned on me," Grace said without preamble. "I've been her friend for 12 years. I covered for her, lied for her, did things I'm ashamed of. And the moment things got difficult, she tried to frame me." "Frame you for what?" "For helping her steal from the charities. She created documents with my signature forged, set up accounts in my name, made it look like I was the mastermind." Grace pulled an envelope from her purse. "So I made copies of everything. Every real document, every email, every piece of evidence that proves what she actually did." Naomi stared at the envelope. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're the only person who stood up to her and survived. Because the attorneys need this. Because," Grace's voice cracked, "because I want to do one good thing before this whole mess destroys everyone." The envelope contained dozens of documents. Forged charity receipts, bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, emails between Vivian and various board members where she discussed creative accounting. text messages that were damning in their casual discussion of illegal activity. Naomi called Marcus Donovan immediately. "Miss Brooks," he said when he answered, "I was just about to call you. The federal investigation has accelerated. They're preparing to file charges within the week. I have something that might help." She explained about Grace, about the documents. "How do I get these to you?" "Stay where you are. I'm sending someone to retrieve them immediately." "And Miss Brooks?" "This is exactly what we needed." That evening, Charles called. His voice sounded tired but satisfied. "Grace's documents confirm everything we suspected and more. Combined with the security footage of Vivian destroying the wine bottle and the financial records the feds already had, the case is airtight." "What happens next?" "The district attorney files charges. Vivian gets arrested. And then the real battle begins, because she'll fight this with every resource she has." "Will I be safe?" "I've made sure of it. Security will stay with you until this is resolved." "And Naomi," he paused, "thank you for your courage, for your integrity, for being exactly the kind of person the world needs more of." After the call, Naomi sat with Lily on the expensive couch in their temporary apartment, watching the sun set over the city. Her little sister leaned against her shoulder. "Are you scared?" Lily asked, terrified. "But you're doing the right thing anyway." "That's usually when people are most scared," Naomi said. "When doing the right thing costs you something." 2 days later, the news broke. Vivian Lancaster, wife of real estate mogul Charles Lancaster, arrested on federal charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. The story dominated local news. Social media exploded with commentary, and Le Montclair's phones rang constantly with reporters wanting statements. Naomi watched it unfold from the safety of her secure apartment, feeling surreal and detached. She'd been a waitress 4 weeks ago. Now she was a federal witness in a case that would be talked about for years. Elias called to tell her she was officially reinstated with full pay for all the days she'd missed. Sarah sent a group text to the entire staff celebrating Vivian's arrest with champagne emojis. Chef Paolo left a voicemail that was mostly incomprehensible Italian, but sounded supportive. And Charles sent a single text: "You were right to stand your ground. Thank you for your strength." But it wasn't over. Vivian made bail within hours, $2 million cash, barely a dent in her resources. And the moment she was free, her lawyers began their counterattack. They filed motions to suppress evidence, questioned the legality of searches, attacked the credibility of witnesses. Most notably, they named Naomi in a defamation suit. "It's a scare tactic," Marcus assured her during an emergency call. "They try to intimidate you into silence. The suit has no merit, and we'll have it dismissed. But I need you to understand, this is going to get worse before it gets better." "How much worse?" "They'll try to destroy your credibility. Dig into your past. Look for anything they can use against you. They'll make you wish you'd never gotten involved." Naomi thought about her mother, who'd worked herself to exhaustion providing for her daughters. She thought about Lily, who deserved a sister she could be proud of. She thought about every person Vivian had bullied, degraded, and destroyed over the years. "Let them try," Naomi said. "I'm not backing down." That night, she dreamed of standing in a courtroom, facing down cold eyes across a polished wooden rail. In the dream, she didn't flinch. When she woke, she knew she wouldn't flinch in reality either. The battle was just beginning, but Naomi Brooks had already won the most important fight, the one for her own soul. The weeks following Vivian's arrest felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion. First one window shattered, then another, then entire floors crumbling until nothing remained but rubble and dust. Naomi returned to work at Le Montclair, this time as assistant manager with her head held high. The restaurant felt different now, lighter somehow, as if Vivian's absence had lifted a weight nobody realized they'd been carrying. Staff members smiled more freely. Laughter echoed from the kitchen. Even the guests seemed to sense the shift, commenting on how warm and welcoming the atmosphere had become. But outside the restaurant's walls, Vivian's empire was burning. The first domino fell when the Westbridge Children's Foundation announced they were pressing criminal charges. Their audit revealed that over $2 million designated for underprivileged youth programs had been funneled into Vivian's personal accounts. The foundation's executive director gave a tearful press conference, holding up photos of children who'd lost scholarships because the money had vanished. "These kids trusted us," she said, her voice breaking. "And we trusted her." Vivian Lancaster stole their futures. The second domino was the social circle. The exclusive group of wealthy socialites who'd once hung on Vivian's every word now distanced themselves with ruthless efficiency. Invitations were rescinded. Phone calls went unanswered. Women who'd called themselves her friends suddenly couldn't recall ever being particularly close. Naomi watched it unfold through news reports and overheard conversations at the restaurant. It should have felt like justice, but mostly it just felt sad. Vivian had built her entire identity on being untouchable, and now she was being erased by the very society she'd tried to dominate. The third domino was Charles. He filed for divorce exactly 1 week after the arrest, citing irreconcilable differences and 15 years of emotional manipulation. His attorney released a statement confirming Charles had been cooperating with federal investigators for months and had no knowledge of his wife's criminal activities. Grace came to the restaurant on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, looking small and exhausted. She sat in Naomi's section, now a gesture of humility rather than intimidation. "I testified before the grand jury yesterday," Grace said quietly. "Told them everything. Every lie she made me tell, every person she destroyed, every crime I witnessed." "That took courage," Naomi said. "It took shame." Grace's eyes were red-rimmed. "I should have done it years ago, before she hurt so many people, before you had to be the one to stand up to her. You're doing it now. That matters." Grace pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. "These are letters. Apologies to every staff member I saw her abuse over the years. I know they don't fix anything, but I needed to write them." After Grace left, Naomi opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes, each one acknowledging specific cruelties and asking for forgiveness. The words were clumsy and inadequate, but they were real. That evening, Elias called an all-staff meeting. He stood before them, looking years younger than he had a month ago, his shoulders no longer permanently hunched with anxiety. "I owe all of you an apology," he began. "For years, I allowed Vivian Lancaster to terrorize this staff because I was afraid of losing business. I prioritized money over people, and that was wrong. But things are changing. Mr. Lancaster has restructured management, and I've been given clear authority to protect our team from any form of abuse. No guest, regardless of wealth or status, has the right to degrade anyone who works here." The staff erupted in applause. Sarah was crying. Even Chef Paolo looked moved, though he'd deny it later. "Additionally," Elias continued, "Naomi Brooks has been promoted to full manager, effective immediately. She'll be working alongside me to create a workplace culture based on respect and dignity." More applause, louder this time. Chris whistled. Maya hugged Naomi so hard she could barely breathe. Later, in her new office, small but hers, Naomi sat with the reality of how much had changed. 6 weeks ago, she'd been terrified of losing a waitressing job. Now she was managing one of the city's most prestigious restaurants with a salary that would cover Lily's education and then some. Her phone buzzed with a message from Charles. "You've earned this. Congratulations." She typed back, "Thank you for everything." His response came quickly. "You saved yourself. I just made sure you had the chance." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early autumn. Naomi sat in the courtroom's public gallery, flanked by Marcus Donovan and 2 security guards Charles had insisted on. The room was packed with reporters, curious spectators, and several of Vivian's former society friends who'd come to watch her fall. Vivian entered in designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's cars, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. But something fundamental had shifted. The confidence was forced now, the regal bearing more defensive than commanding. She looked like someone playing a role she no longer quite believed in. Charles sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, his expression unreadable. When Vivian's eyes found him, something desperate flashed across her face before her mask snapped back into place. The prosecution laid out their case with devastating precision. Financial records showing systematic theft from 3 charitable foundations. Emails proving she'd knowingly falsified documents. Testimony from board members she'd manipulated. And Grace's insider account of how the schemes had operated. Vivian's attorney tried to poke holes in the evidence, suggesting alternative interpretations and questioning witness credibility. But the numbers didn't lie. $6 million had disappeared, and the trail led directly to accounts Vivian controlled. During a recess, Naomi stepped into the hallway for air. She found Grace standing by a window, staring out at the city below. "Do you think she'll go to prison?" Grace asked. "I don't know. That's up to the judge and jury. Part of me hopes she does. For justice." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "But part of me just feels sad. She wasn't always like this, you know. When I first met her, she was charming and generous and fun. Somewhere along the way, the power became more important than the person. What changed her? I don't think anything changed her. I think she just stopped hiding who she really was." When court resumed, the prosecution called Naomi to the stand. Her legs felt unsteady as she walked to the witness box, aware of every eye in the room following her movement. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor was a sharp woman in her 50s named Angela Torres. She smiled reassuringly at Naomi before beginning. "Miss Brooks, can you describe your first encounter with Vivian Lancaster?" Naomi took a breath and began. She described the fear in the staff, the impossible demands, the systematic cruelty disguised as high standards. She talked about the dinner party, about blocking Vivian's hand, about the papers she'd seen Vivian desperately trying to hide. "And at any point," Angela asked, "did Mrs. Lancaster ever acknowledge wrongdoing or express remorse?" "No. She seemed to believe she was entitled to treat people however she wanted." Vivian's attorney cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint Naomi as vindictive or attention-seeking. But Naomi stayed calm, answered honestly, and refused to be rattled. She'd faced Vivian's cruelty for weeks. A hostile attorney was nothing by comparison. When she stepped down, Charles caught her eye and nodded once. Approval, respect, gratitude, all conveyed in that single gesture. The hearing lasted 3 days. Witness after witness testified to Vivian's crimes. Foundation directors, forensic accountants, even a former housekeeper who'd seen Vivian burning documents in their fireplace. The evidence piled up like snow in a blizzard, cold and suffocating. On the final day, Vivian took the stand in her own defense. It was a calculated risk by her attorneys, but desperation sometimes demanded bold moves. Under questioning from her own lawyer, Vivian portrayed herself as a victim of circumstance. She claimed the foundation boards had been disorganized, that she'd simply been trying to manage funds efficiently, that any irregularities were honest mistakes made by well-meaning volunteers. Her voice trembled at strategic moments. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. It might have worked on people who hadn't seen her in action, but Angela Torres destroyed the performance during cross-examination. "Mrs. Lancaster, you testified that you were unaware of the account discrepancies. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Yet you have a master's degree in business administration from an Ivy League university, correct?" "Yes." "And you serve on the boards of multiple financial institutions?" "Yes." "So you're either lying about your knowledge, or you're admitting to gross incompetence in managing millions of dollars. Which is it?" Vivian's composure cracked. "I'm neither incompetent nor a liar. You're twisting my words. I'm reading your own testimony, Mrs. Lancaster. You can't have it both ways. You can't be a sophisticated businesswoman when it suits you and a confused volunteer when it doesn't." The exchange continued, each question peeling away another layer of Vivian's defense until nothing remained but the truth. She'd stolen millions of dollars from charities meant to help children, and she'd done it deliberately and systematically. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Vivian stood. For a moment, she looked directly at Naomi. Their eyes met across the crowded courtroom, and Naomi saw something she'd never seen before in those cold, calculating eyes. "Fear. I made mistakes," Vivian said finally, her voice barely audible. "But I never meant to hurt anyone." The judge's expression suggested she found that claim difficult to believe. This court will recess until tomorrow morning, at which time I will deliver my ruling on whether this case proceeds to trial. That evening, Naomi sat in the secure apartment with Lily, both of them too wound up to sleep. The news was covering the hearing extensively, legal analysts debating the strength of the prosecution's case, social media exploding with opinions. "Do you think it's over?" Lily asked. "I think the worst part is over. But there's still the trial, if the judge allows it to proceed." "And then what? What happens to you?" Naomi considered the question. "Then I go back to my life. I work at the restaurant. I help you with college applications. I figure out what comes next." "You're different now," Lily observed. "Stronger. I don't know if I'm stronger. Maybe I just finally learned I was strong enough all along." The next morning, the courtroom was even more packed than before. Naomi arrived early, flanked by her usual security detail, and took her seat. Charles was already there, looking tired but resolute. Grace sat alone in the back row, a ghost haunting her own reckoning. Vivian entered last, and Naomi was struck by how diminished she looked. The designer suit couldn't hide the defeat in her shoulders, the desperation in her eyes. This was a woman watching her entire world disintegrate, and she had no one to blame but herself. The judge entered, and everyone stood. When they sat again, the silence was absolute. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence presented in this preliminary hearing," the judge began. "The financial records are clear and damning. The witness testimony is credible and consistent. The defendant's explanations are neither plausible nor supported by evidence." Vivian's attorney started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "Mrs. Lancaster, you are hereby ordered to stand trial on all counts of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Additionally, based on the severity of these crimes and your substantial financial resources, I'm revoking your bail. You will be remanded to custody until trial." The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors. Vivian's face went chalk white. She turned to her attorney, her mouth moving in what looked like frantic pleas, but two bailiffs were already approaching. "Your Honor," Vivian's attorney said desperately, "my client poses no flight risk. Your client has the means and motivation to flee the country. Bail is revoked. Court is adjourned." As the bailiffs led Vivian away, she looked back one last time. Not at Charles, not at her attorney, but at Naomi. And in that look was pure venom. Hatred so intense, it was almost physical. But Naomi didn't look away. She met those eyes steadily, refusing to be intimidated even now. She'd faced Vivian's worst and survived. She'd stood up when everyone else stayed silent. She'd chosen dignity over fear. And she'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Naomi pushed through them with her security guards, declining to comment. But one reporter's shouted question made her pause. "Miss Brooks, what would you say to other people who are being bullied by powerful individuals?" Naomi turned and looked directly at the camera. "I'd say your dignity is worth fighting for. I'd say powerful people can be held accountable. And I'd say you're stronger than you think you are." Then she walked away, leaving the reporters scrambling for their next angle. 3 months later, Vivian Lancaster was convicted on all counts. The trial lasted 2 weeks, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts across the board. Sentencing came a month after that. 12 years in federal prison, plus restitution of all stolen funds and their accrued interest. The judge's statement was scathing, calling Vivian's crimes a betrayal of public trust and a callous exploitation of society's most vulnerable. Vivian showed no emotion as she was led away. But later, from her cell, she sent Charles a single letter. He showed it to Naomi one evening at the restaurant, after most of the staff had gone home. "You took everything from me." The letter read in Vivian's perfect handwriting. "My reputation, my freedom, my life. I hope you're satisfied." Charles folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket. "She still doesn't understand. She took everything from herself. Do you regret marrying her?" He considered the question. "I regret not seeing who she truly was sooner. I regret the people she hurt while I looked away. But I don't regret the lessons I learned about character and courage." He smiled slightly. most of which I learned from a 26-year-old waitress who refused to be broken. Naomi's life transformed in the months that followed. She enrolled in online business courses, working toward the hospitality degree she'd abandoned years ago. Lily started her senior year of high school, her grades strong enough to attract interest from several colleges. The secure apartment became permanent when Charles transferred the lease to Naomi's name, a gift she tried to refuse until he pointed out she'd more than earned it. Montclair thrived under the new management philosophy. Staff turnover dropped to nearly zero. Online reviews praised the warmth and professionalism of the service. Business actually increased as word spread about the restaurant's transformed culture. Naomi promoted Sarah to assistant manager and gave Chris the lead server position he'd always deserved. She instituted a zero-tolerance policy for guest abuse and personally handled any customer who crossed the line. The wealthy still came, but they came knowing their money didn't buy them the right to degrade human beings. One evening, a woman arrived for dinner who reminded Naomi painfully of Vivian. The designer clothes, the imperious manner, the air of someone accustomed to instant obedience. She snapped her fingers at a server and began listing demands in a tone that made the young man's face go red. Naomi approached the table with a professional smile. "I'm Naomi Brooks, the manager. I understand you have some concerns about your service." "Your server is incompetent," the woman said coldly. "I want someone else. Our server is excellent, and he's following proper protocol. However, if you're unhappy with our restaurant, I'd be happy to recommend several other establishments that might suit you better." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Are you refusing to serve me? I'm offering you alternatives, because we have one policy here that's non-negotiable: respect. Our staff treats guests with respect, and we expect the same in return." For a long moment, the woman stared at Naomi. Then, slowly, her expression shifted. "You're that girl from the news, the one who stood up to Vivian Lancaster. I'm a manager who expects all guests to treat our staff with basic human dignity." The woman was quiet for several seconds. Then she turned to the server. "I apologize. I was rude. Please bring me whatever you recommend." After she left, Chris approached Naomi with awe in his eyes. "You just did what we've all dreamed of doing for years." "I did what anyone should do. People deserve respect." 6 months after Vivian's sentencing, Charles hosted a small celebration at the restaurant. The guest list included all the staff members who'd supported Naomi, Grace Meyer, now working with victims' rights organizations, and Marcus Donovan, whose legal expertise had been invaluable. Charles stood and raised his glass. "To Naomi Brooks, who proved that courage doesn't require wealth or power. It just requires a good heart and an iron spine." "To Naomi," everyone chorused. Later, as guests mingled and laughed, Charles pulled Naomi aside. "I'm filing the final divorce papers this week. Starting fresh. How does it feel? Liberating? Terrifying? Long overdue." He smiled. "I'm also stepping back from day-to-day operations at several businesses, spending more time on philanthropy, less time accumulating wealth I don't need." "What changed?" "You did. Watching you stand up for what was right, regardless of the cost, reminded me who I wanted to be." He paused. "I'm funding a scholarship program for hospitality students who've had to leave school for family reasons. In your mother's name, if you'll allow it." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "She would have loved that. I thought she might." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Naomi found herself alone in the dining room, looking at the space that had once felt like a battlefield. Now it felt like home, not because the chandeliers glittered or the food was expensive, but because the people who worked here were valued and protected. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Don't forget to pick up milk on your way home, manager lady. And I love you." Naomi smiled and replied, "Love you too, almost college kid." She turned off the lights in the dining room and locked up for the night. Outside, the city spread before her in a carpet of lights, full of possibilities, challenges, and futures waiting to be built. A year ago, Naomi had been terrified of losing a minimum wage job. Tonight, she was a manager with a college scholarship, a safe home, and a sister whose future was secure. Most importantly, she was someone who'd learned that dignity couldn't be taken, only surrendered. And Naomi Brooks had never been very good at surrendering. As she walked to her car, she passed a young woman in a cheap suit heading into a late-night diner, probably heading to a service industry job that didn't pay enough and demanded too much. Naomi almost stopped her, almost said something about standing tall and refusing to accept cruelty. But then she realized the woman would learn it herself, in her own time, through her own battles. Everyone had to find their own strength eventually. Naomi had found hers in a moment of confrontation with cold eyes and cruel words. She'd found it in the support of co-workers who became friends. She'd found it in the choice to stand up, even when standing up seemed impossible. And she'd found it in the simple, revolutionary act of believing she deserved better. That belief had changed everything. So here's the real question. When someone tries to take your dignity, do you surrender it to survive? Or do you stand tall knowing it might cost you everything? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage against impossible odds.